Hey, it's Sunday night. It's the Bible Forum. I'm Warren Sprouse, and I'm here for you. We do this every week right here at this spot, wherever you're watching. Tonight we're going to look at a book. It's a 2014 book, a couple of years old. I think it was written by Joel Richardson, but I'm not sure. The post that I got was from him, so it's probably his book. If not, as we work through it, we'll see that where it comes from. But it's called Islamic Antichrist, the shocking truth about the real nature of the beast. Earlier tonight we're talking about the solar eclipse that's coming on Monday, tomorrow, and how there are those out there trying to make that into something eschatological, that somehow this is a sign from God relative to Israel and the end of the world and all the rest of it. It's nonsense. America's not Israel, and it's not working that way. But there are events that are coalescing. There's a lot of stuff coming together. And while we used to look at the Antichrist and we used to look at some of the players in that great battle at the end, being Russia and Egypt and United States representing the Western community, and then all the Arab nations, things are changing a little bit, and I'd like to keep you up to speed. Joel Richardson writes, at the time the nation of Turkey is still viewed by virtually all Western political analysts as a kind of model government that ought to be replicated throughout the Muslim world. But the leader of that political entity, a fellow by the name of Erdogan, and his party, the AKP party, while they initially looked like they were the poster boy for everything good and right moving forward, are now evolving, if they haven't already evolved, into something much different and much worse. Bible students have always struggled with placing modern Turkey in the biblical narrative. 2,500 years ago, the prophet Ezekiel foretold a last days invasion of Israel that would specifically be led by Turkey. In Richardson's book, Mideast Beast, it's called, he worked through Ezekiel's prophecy to show how the Bible doesn't point to a last days Russian-led invasion of Israel at all, but instead to one led by Turkey. He's identifying Gog and Magog as Turks and Turkey. President Obama viewed Turkey as a vital ally in the Middle East region. A quick 5 years later, Erdogan has emerged as one of the most dangerous dictators of our day. Today, there are more journalists in prison in Turkey than any other nation on earth. And their party, the AKP-led government, has assumed complete control over virtually every media outlet in the nation. The president has even sought to arrest his critics in nations as far abroad as Germany and the United States. Erdogan openly stated that he has imprisoned foreign citizens to use as bargaining chips in his hope that foreign governments will extradite his critics to Turkey for punishment. In addition, well over 100,000 of his own citizens have either been indefinitely imprisoned or fired from their jobs on suspicion of supporting opposition perspectives. Throughout the nation, men and women continue to disappear randomly and suddenly, literally snatched off the streets simply for suspicion of holding critical views of the president. The elderly, those with incapacitating illnesses, pregnant women, and even babies are now routinely incarcerated. The current national roundup of Erdogan's enemies or political opponents is eerily reminiscent of Nazi Germany. Yet this is just the beginning. We've reached a point where the president of a NATO nation is now openly threatening European nations while he increases military cooperation with Russia. enemy of NATO nations, and nobody is rising up to complain. Turkish forces brazenly attack U.S. allies in northern Syria and Iraq, and the president openly brags about it, taunting us to do anything at all about it. There's abundant evidence that for the first few years of the ISIS caliphate, Erdogan's government was actually assisting them with everything from medical treatment in Turkey to logistical support to actually supplying them with weapons. Instead of working to destroy ISIS on its southern border, Turkey has worked to target the Kurds, the primary group responsible for successfully fighting ISIS these past 3 years. One prominent AKP-sponsored imam has even publicly called for a Turkish invasion of Jerusalem. Meanwhile, a few dozen nuclear warheads still remain under Turkish control at the Incirlik air base in eastern Turkey. Something has gone deeply, deeply wrong. Well, how did all this happen? To help you understand how we got here, we have to go back to the Ottoman Empire. In the late 1800s, early 1900s, Turkey was often referred to as, quote, the sick man of Europe, end of quote. Turkey's economy was a complete quagmire. Meanwhile, the Industrial Revolution throughout the West was in full swing, as developing technologies and economies of the Western world were skyrocketing. I can't talk right. Turkey, as the leader of much of the Islamic world, was floundering. And then along came a man by the name of Mustafa Ataturk. Now, Ataturk is actually an honorific title meaning the father of the Turks. He came on the scene in 1923. Ataturk saw the rise of Europe as the cause of the slumping condition of the Ottoman Empire. Ataturk reasoned that if a more secular republic could be established, then Turkey would be unfettered to rise just like the West. Ataturk dissolved the government and the office of caliph. Keep in mind, this is 400-year-old system. He set in place rigid systems of checks and balances whereby Turkey would forever remain a more secular nation. For example, if Turkey became too Islamic, the military would remove that government from power. And that has actually happened several times in the last 80 years. Ataturk's nemesis was a man by the name of Bediüzzaman al-Nursi, an imam. He is the father of Turkish Islam. Instead of confronting the West, he created a form of Islam the West would welcome with open arms, a decaffeinated form of Islam. Then there's an imam named Fethullah Gulen, a charismatic man who wove nationalism with education, science, and charitable acts of kindness, directing them toward interfaith dialogue. Underneath, however, Gulen was secretly instructing his followers to, quote, infiltrate the very arteries of the system, end of quote, the system of society and government, in order to lay in wait until the most opportune time to take Turkey from the secularists and ultimately reestablish the Turkish-led caliphate. Recordings have been found with him preaching that message. Where is this man today? Well, he's right here. He's in Pennsylvania. He's under the protection of the American government. His organization has 120 U.S. charter schools. It was from this group of supporters that Erdogan was able to rise to power. Solidifying his power, Erdogan broke away from Gulen's supporters, culminating with the events of the Taksim Square, May 15th of 2013. A violent crackdown, protests emerged, people died, thousands were hospitalized. The protests continued, however, and escalated, becoming even more violent. From his hideaway in Pennsylvania, Gulen ordered his operatives to target Erdogan's son. They released a secret recording of Erdogan on the phone telling his son that the police were on the way and that he was to remove the piles of cash hidden in his apartment before they arrived. Over the next years, the battle has enlarged. On the night of July 15, 2016, the conflict came to a full head with the now infamous failed Turkish coup d'etat. It worked perfectly the first time. It worked even better the second time. In just 1 year after the failed coup, Erdogan's government has arrested over 123,000 citizens, fired over 145,000, removed nearly 9,000 academics, closed over 2,000 schools, arrested nearly 300 journalists, shut down close to 200 media outlets, and has dismissed close to 5,000 judges. This doesn't include the increasing number of men and women who continue just simply to disappear, having been literally snatched off the streets, never to be seen again. Erdogan has absolute power in Turkey. 20 years ago, Erdogan said democracy is like a streetcar. You ride it till you get where you need to get, and then you get off. He got off. So what will he do? Well, the mask of moderation is gone. Islamic nationalism is just like German nationalism was, ruthlessly efficient. And in his celebration, he visited the tomb of Selim the Grim, Sultan who ruled the Ottoman Empire from 1512 until 1520, expanding the empire over Egypt, Syria, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia. It was expected he would go to the tomb of Ataturk. Instead, he sent a signal that there was a new Selim the Grim in power. In the Western press, various think tanks, and op-ed pieces, Richardson says, we are seeing suggestions that the key to Middle Eastern stability is a return to Ottoman regional control, a new Turkish Ottoman order of sorts. While our attention is drawn to ISIS and Iran, Turkey, with the largest army in the East, grows more centralized and more powerful, and the Western media ignores it all. And what does the Bible say? Ezekiel 38, and the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal, and prophesy against him. And say, Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal, and I will turn thee back, and put hooks into thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth, and all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Gomer and all his bands, the house of Togarmah of the north quarters, and all his bands, and many people with thee. Be thou prepared, and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them. After many days thou shalt be visited. In the latter years thou shalt come into the land that is brought back from the sword, and is gathered out of many people against the mountains of Israel, which have always been waste, but is brought forth out of the nations, and they shall dwell safely, all of them. At that point thou shalt ascend and come like a storm. Thou shalt be like a cloud to cover the land, thou and all thy bands, and many people with thee. Thus saith the Lord, it shall come to pass that at that same time shall things come into thy mind, and thou shalt think an evil thought. And thou shalt say, I will go up to the land of unwalled villages, I will go to them that are at rest, that dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls and having neither bars nor gates, to take a spoil and to take a prey, to turn thine hand upon the desolate places that are now inhabited, and upon the people that are gathered out of the nations, which are gotten cattle and goods, that dwell in the midst of the land. The land is Israel. When? Soon. Very soon.